At the end of this video, so this is our part two, and I'd like to basically just play you the end of Marina Purkiss's interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I'd like you to notice how Marina Purkiss takes over the interview, and for a few moments it's quite clear that Marina Purkiss is the person interviewing and Jacob Rees-Mogg is the interviewee. But there's also the issue of the interview finishes on the subject of a newspaper article written by Rees-Mogg and Lord Frost. And Frost, of course, was the fellow who tried to negotiate Brexit and got it supremely wrong and left so much mess, which people like Chris Heaton-Harris has had to clean up. And not done brilliantly, but done about as well as it is possible to do. So the question which was posed by Rees-Mogg is how will the government manage free speech in the future, and the idea is that it will do so by an anti-woke policy. That anti-woke policy will restore the economy. This is absurd, and Marina Purkiss points that out rather brilliantly. She points out the wastage in the cabinet of £140,000 wasted by the government. Is this how we're going to save the economy? She talks about the deregulation, scaling back workers' rights. And then he cuts her off to make way for the weather. Just when it starts to get interesting, he stops her. So he spent most of the interview talking over her, and then he finally stops her. Now, what does this mean? So it's not so much that she gets across a great argument. She doesn't, actually. She starts to, but she is very much up against her match here. A man who, in a very smooth way, has found a platform to allow people to have a certain amount of freedom, but not enough to actually engage, and not enough to make a full argument because he interrupts so much. And she did about as well as anybody could do, but it's a demonstration. It's a perfect demonstration of the nature of free speech that he envisages for the rest of our country. That is, that we will have the freedom to speak as long as we don't have power. So you're allowed to speak for 9 minutes, for example, and then you must be cut off when I want you to be cut off. There's no complex understanding here of what it means for the media, for example, to be curated by a very small group of people who are in the pocket of the government. There's no understanding in Rees-Mogg's presentation of freedom that takes account of the fact that organizations like GB News or Talk TV are owned by individual companies who, again, curate the speech that takes place on those channels. The freedom here to speak is divorced from power. Even in this small example, they don't have the power to control the amount of time that they are speaking. The conversation is not a conversation because Rees-Mogg doesn't listen to what Marina Purkiss is saying and doesn't respond. He continues ploughing ahead with his own ideology, and it's potentially offensive. And there's a lot of finger jabbing because he's actually getting very annoyed, I think. When it comes to the freedom of, let's say, unions, the sort of collective action, that is being completely curtailed. And if the moment that people's conversation, if the moment that people's talk is an assertion of power which the present government doesn't like, then that talk is cut off. And where is the example of this? Where does this example come from? It comes from the model that we see, or the model that we hear routinely when we telephone our telephone provider, when we telephone really anybody with, quote, authority over us. The moment we challenge that authority, we are immediately told that the conversation is over, the conversation is terminated. And the first few times it happens to you, you think, oh my goodness, have I said something wrong? No, you haven't. All you've done is to assert authority in the context of freedom of speech, because the conversation is not supposed to be a conversation. It's a capitulation. You are supposed to capitulate to the authority. And you're given time in which to do that. And that's why we have particular managerial roles for a complaints department. You don't speak to the people who have caused the offence. You speak to the complaints department that manages your complaint. It's an illusion of freedom. It's not real freedom. And this was beautifully demonstrated in the end of this Marina Purkiss interview. So let's watch it through to the end, and I'd love to hear your comments.
OK, tell me I'm wrong. Let me ask you a question. When you said to people that Brexit was going to bring cheaper food...
It will.
Clothes, footwear and drink. So it will.
All this is in progress. Joining the CTPPP, the free trade deal with Australia, the free trade deal with New Zealand, all of these are bringing in lower tariffs on food coming into this country.
This is
already in the pipeline.
What do you think's going to happen at the end of this year when those full Brexit checks are going to come into play? Do you remember the ones this time last year you said were an act of self-harm?
Yes, I stopped them. That's right.
They're coming in this year.
Well, there is no reason.
What's going to happen then?
There is no reason to bring those in. Those should be stopped again.
They're coming
and that
in.
Is with
that's the Brexit.
The government can stop that. No, not at all. That is. If the government wishes to put those controls on, that is an act of a democratic government. Do I think they're foolish? Yes, of course I do. That's why I tried to stop them, succeeded in stopping them last year. I'm not in government, I'm a member of the Conservative Party.
That is the Brexit. Yeah,
but why is it that food inflation is higher in the EU average than it is in the UK? We're doing better than the EU.
Why don't you compare us? Because I saw the other day you compared us to Austria for inflation. Great comparison there, James.
It is a great comparison.
Oh, wonderful. Why on
Our food inflation is lower than Germany.
Why would you compare us to Austria, who have the highest inflation, one of the highest inflations in the world, and also their GDP is in the billions, ours is in the trillions. Why then would you...
Our food inflation is lower than Germany. Why? So actually, I'm happy to take a variety of comparisons. Why Austria? Austria is renowned for its economic caution. There's a whole school of Austrian economists who are famous for economic caution.
Why don't you compare us to other comparable countries in the G7? Tell your viewers why our food costs are soaring and why they're going to continue to soar.
Our food costs are rising by less than the average for the EU and less than by Germany. So that's not too bad, is it?
No, it's going up. Why are our energy bills the highest on the planet?
Well, when I was in government, we made the biggest intervention to help people with their energy bills.
No, that's not what I'm asking. Why are they the highest on the planet?
The energy bills in the UK have gone up because of our green policies.
Oh, OK.
That has led to a very significant increase.
Nothing to do with Conservative failures year after year after year.
It's nothing to do with Brexit.
No, I'm not blaming Brexit for that, actually.
No, absolutely nothing to do with Brexit.
But
what was I trying to do? I was trying to reduce prices by fracking, by shale gas.
Fracking. Here we go again. Here we go
Using our resources.
Fracking. Do you want to tell people how long it would take to get any sort of benefit from fracking and how teeny tiny that benefit would be, and the fact that it would do absolutely nothing?
We're potentially sitting on trillions of cubic feet of gas underneath us. I'm not. There are very good geological studies showing this.
Do you genuinely believe your lies?
All you say when you disagree is that somebody is lying. But this isn't a proper political argument.
You've been proven time and time again. And you never say, do you know what? I'm really sorry. I told you that everything was going to be better and cheaper, and it's not.
You disagree with me, but that's not the same as somebody lying. Disagreement is perfectly reasonable.
Sorry, if you promise something, and it doesn't materialise, that's a lie.
What I promised about tariffs on food is true. They are being reduced with the free trade agreements that we've been negotiating.
Should we revisit that at the end of this year when your act of self-harm comes into play?
Well, that would be madness if the government does that, and I shall oppose that very strongly.
OK, let's go. Why don't we?
Why would the government?
Let's go back to woke, right? Because we want to talk about woke culture wars. I read your fascinating article with Frost in The Telegraph. That's a great person to partner with, by the way.
It is. He's a very great man, very distinguished figure. Responsible, wise, good.
Shoddy deal that now no one likes, by the way. No one's happy with this. No, he did. So well done. Great partner.
He got out of the European Union. He did a good negotiation with the EU.
Literally no one is happy with this. Brexiteers are not happy with this deal.
Well, I don't think that's right. Okay. I think the Brexiters are very happy that we're out of the European Union.
In this article, you talked about how anti-woke policies are going to help recover the country. Why it needs recovering, right? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, how are your anti-woke policies going to help restore the economy, for example? Explain it.
Well, we want supply-side reform. We want the economy to get to higher levels of growth.
And
this
how
is
your
really,
anti-woke
this is
policies
really
going to do
important.
that?
We don't want people distracted
Please explain
by
it.
all
We've
the
got
wokeness.
only a small amount of time.
Well, as we were discussing earlier, the £140,000, small amount of money in itself, being wasted by the Cabinet Office. That's part of the point.
140.
Yeah, but
sorry,
simply,
we're talking about fixing the economy, and you've just quoted 140,000
I'm talking about things that are symptomatic of the problems of the waste within the government.
When Jacob talks about deregulation, that's a big thing. You're all about deregulation. What Jacob is talking about is scaling back your workers' rights and consumer rights.
I'm afraid we're going to have to draw this to a conclusion, but you're wrong on that because our employment rights all predate the European Union
didn't even want minimum
by and
wage.
large.
In 2011,
but unfortunately, we've got to go straight to the weather. We've overrun.